Dear ancestors, I understand the assignment. The Great Migration was indeed a relocation from Albany to Pittsburgh, escaping Jim Crow's subjugation. I see you striving between progress and hesitation, quiet revolutionaries, creating slow and steady transformation as we become you in new iterations. The Great Migration, laying seed for new generations. My mother was Connie Gale. They called her Bonnie. I am the granddaughter of Pinky, that was her real name, the great-granddaughter of Picola, whose real name was Maureen, the great-great-granddaughter of Mom Millie, and the great-great-great-granddaughter of Matt Rain. This is as far back as I can go on my mother's side, and I know these things because as an only child who spent quite a bit of time around her great-grandmother, I asked a lot of questions on a loop, to the degree that she called me a pest. Today I stand before you, the mother of Maya, Michaela, and Emmanuel. My mother, Bonnie, was the renowned stealer of pictures in our family, the picture thief. The running joke was, never let Bonnie see or touch your photographs because if you did, one thing for sure, two things for certain, you were never going to see them again. And they were right. She would take everybody else's pictures and store them in boxes underneath her bed for safekeeping. She even kept the negatives wrapped in envelopes and stored them in tightly sealed plastic containers. But I knew where they were because one of my favorite pastimes growing up was to mill through these photographs, black and white stills of my people. My granddaddy with his fedora hat, pencil mustache and suspenders. My grandmother in her early 20s with A-line dresses and press and curl pixie-style hairdos. My mom and her sister, the prequel to my own two daughters, Maya and Michaela, dressed like twins with matching patent leather shoes and bobby socks. My great uncles coming home on leave in uniform. It made perfect sense one day when we were visiting Pittsburgh 20 years or so ago, when my great uncle Elijah watched my two daughters playing outside on a family visit. I always tried to make great use of my time when I was home because as a military family, we didn't get home as much as we liked to, but he watched Maya and Michaela playing one day, and he said, that's Pinky and Ella Mae right there. He was referring to my grandmother and her sister. They are 11 months apart, and my two daughters are 13 months apart. So him saying that made perfect sense. Move into the era of the 70s, when the pictures became color. My mom and dad's wedding, dad dressed in a gray pinstripe suit, big afro. Mom dressed in a nice, slender, plain white dress with a slash of color going down the middle. These are the pictures that rooted me in identity and gave me a sense of belonging in the world. By the way, my grandmother Pinky was a selfie queen before cell phones. We're talking back in the 50s. She used to dress up in ornate gowns, hold flowers, and pose on couches as if she was doing a cover of a magazine. Now I know where I got it from. In 2015, my mother died. We were stationed in Germany. As the next of kin, it was my job to get home, all five of us, my three kids, my husband, settle her estate, clear out her apartment, and plan a funeral in about 10-ish days. In doing this, I had to go through decades of stuff in her home. It was like going through a time capsule. There were a lot of things that I could not bring back with me to Germany, as you can imagine. I couldn't even take her ashes back across customs with me. But the one thing I knew I needed to get were the pictures. I might have stolen a few myself through the years. I told my husband and my dad, please go buy me a suitcase so I can take all the yearbooks, all the photo albums, all the plastic containers, all the portraits. This is what I need to bring back with me. These pictures mean more to me than money. When the Gray Fire happened 2 summers ago now, and we had to suddenly evacuate, one of the scariest moments of my adult life. The one thing I said while we're shoving the dogs and the dog food and the lockbox that's fireproof into the car, I said, go get the suitcase. Don't forget the hot pink suitcase. I knew where it was. It was right in the front of our garage so that in situations where we would have to leave, those pictures would not be forgotten. Those are all I have left of those people in those pictures. And when that's all you have left, that's what carries you. In March of 2024, this year, I was on a work trip to New York City, the Big Apple, the city that never sleeps. In Times Square, I walked around at night shopping, because what else do you do in New York at like the 10 o'clock hour, right? And I'm leaving Forever 21. And I entertained the idea of getting a charcoal portrait done. Those are fun to me. The caricature ones are really fun, but I wanted like a real sketch of myself. So a very eager artist saw me walking out. I looked over at his display, and he rushed me in, he ushered me in. Come, sit, sit. And he even discounted it for me. I guess business was a little slow that night. So it was cold, I was tired, but it was New York. And I sat in a chair while this stranger looked at me, looked at his canvas, kept looking back at me. And I just sat there kind of trying not to twitch too much, kind of tired, a little bit chilly. And I watched passersby, and they looked at me, then they would look at the artist's sketch, and they looked back at me. Some of them did this. Others of them were like, okay. So I'm like, okay. And I'm wondering if this was a good idea, right? So for about 30 minutes or so, I sat and patiently awaited this picture that I was anxious to see. Finally, when he got done, he motioned for me to come over to the other side of the easel. I was expecting to see a reflection of myself. When I looked at what he'd done, I was stuck. I just almost was in a stupor. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I knew the exact photograph that this picture reminded me of because I had all the pictures. I'd even reproduced some of these pictures from the actual negatives that my mom kept safe in those small canisters. It was my grandmother at 20 years old with my granddaddy with his suspenders, and they were seated together on a couch, and she was leaning in. The same dead serious stare that she had in that photograph was what I saw on that canvas. The way her head was tilted even, it was surreal. And he was asking me how he had done. How did I do? Did I do good? Did I do good? And I just looked at him. I couldn't even answer because I was studying the picture so intensely because my familiarity with all those old black and white pictures was right there. I looked at him and I said, "You drew my grandmother." I couldn't even believe it because it was so identical. In that moment, what I thought was going to be a reflection was actually me standing in the portal of time. Thank you.